Well, good afternoon and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. I'm Stephen White, a member of CMC Board of Trustees, and I'm also Vice President of Strategic Initiatives at COSI, your #1 science center in the nation.
Again.
Back to back.
Again.
Back to back. Metro Club live streaming is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Foundation and PNC. Thank you so very much. Today's forum is sponsored by JP Chase, the Robert Weiler Company. Won't you please help me thank them now? So let's welcome Courtney Filato, VP of Global Philanthropy at the JP Chase Foundation, to introduce our forum for today. Courtney?
Thank you, Stephen. Good afternoon, everybody. JP Chase is proud to support the Columbus Metropolitan Club, as each week they bring important community issues to the stage for public conversation. Everyone says kids grow up fast, and they do. Time and again, studies show that infants' brains begin development before birth, and that early years are critical for young humans to successfully develop to their full potential. Children require a nurturing environment with adequate food, shelter, education, and social interaction. Children of today and of those soon to come are our collective future. We must all ensure that all of them, every single one of them, have fair and equitable opportunities and access to the resources to get them there. Please welcome Professor and Director of Undergraduate Studies, Department of Sociology at The Ohio State University, and author of How Schools Really Matter, Douglas Downey. President and CEO of Battelle for Kids, Karen Garza. CEO of Future Ready Columbus, Jane Leach. And our host, lifelong journalist and CMC board member, Carol Lukerborough. Carol, the stage is yours.
Thank you and welcome, everybody. This is a topic that is very near and dear to all of us with children and grandchildren. And I want to alert our panel, jump in with questions. Don't be shy. I'll start. And we'll start with the gentleman on the stage, Professor Douglas Downey. Professor, what is your role at The Ohio State University? And I am reading your book, and I find your interest in early childhood most interesting and a little bit controversial. Talk about what you do and what your research has found.
I'm a professor at Ohio State in the Department of Sociology. I'm also the director of undergraduate studies. Our program has about 1,000 majors in sociology and criminology. I have been interested in issues of inequality my whole career. Why do some groups have more stuff than others? How do they keep it? Why do these patterns persist? And so I originally was very interested in the role that schools play in this process. Are schools a culprit? Are they making inequality worse? Are they a largely neutral institution? Or do they sometimes rub the rough edges off of inequality? Most of the training that I had for my dissertation and my PhD would suggest, most of the work that I read would suggest that schools, the unequal schools that we have in our American system play a large role exacerbating inequality. But my own research has started to look at this more closely, and the conclusion that I come to is somewhat different. And let me tell you a couple patterns that are somewhat surprising. But the best evidence suggests the following, and that is that when children arrive at kindergarten, high-income and low-income children have large gaps in their skills already. If we measure their reading skills or their math skills, there are very large gaps the first day of kindergarten. Now, if schools are an engine of inequality and really a culprit and make that a lot worse, we would expect those gaps to then increase during the school years, but they do not. If we, in the work that I'm doing, between kindergarten and 8th grade, both the math and reading gaps decline in their magnitude. They become smaller, which is inconsistent with the view that schools are really the culprit here. Let me share one other pattern that is provocative and somewhat unique to the kind of research we do. Most education scholars look at data that's collected like every year. The research team that I have at Ohio State, what we do is we split the year into 2 sections: children's growth during the 9 months when they're in school, and then we observe what happens during the 3 months of summer when they're not in school. And the very interesting pattern that we find when we do that kind of research is that the inequalities between high and low-income children, they emerge and grow in the summers when they're not in school. But when they are in school, the 9 months of school, their learning trajectories are very similar and inequalities are not growing. These kinds of patterns have prompted me to rethink the role that schools are a real culprit or an engine of inequality, and to think more about what is prompting those large gaps at kindergarten entry in the first place, and how can we reduce those gaps.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would say I am intrigued, and I can't wait to read your book now. I would say from just a practical side, having been in the education business for over, I guess, around 38 years, Dr. Dixon's here. She's a wonderful colleague of mine. I've lost count to Lisa. I don't remember how many years it is, but it's been a long time. But I started off my career I was a superintendent, school superintendent for many years, but I started my career as a kindergarten teacher. So I've always been fascinated with exactly what you studied. And what I observed, just on from a practical perspective, is not too many years ago, kindergarten was really developmental experiences getting kids ready for reading that began in first grade. So we didn't really begin to focus on reading until first grade. What's happened over time with the advent of high stakes testing and just accountability and all of that, it's pushed those standards down to the point now where in kindergarten, it's become the new first grade. And so in the second semester of kindergarten, people start to get concerned if kids aren't reading. But we have to also consider, is that developmentally appropriate, which I know Jane probably has some responses on that. But exactly what Douglas was saying, those gaps are exacerbated by the fact that we've pushed down the curriculum and that kids coming into kindergarten, that gap is there immediately. And so I've always been a strong advocate of early childhood programming, beginning as early as we can, but at minimum ages 3 and 4, high quality. And that's how we can at least get a better handle on keeping those gaps smaller early on. And I can't wait to read your book and learn more about what you found in the research.
Wow, I wish we had more than 35 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour to talk about this, because the 3 of us just had a very engaging lunch conversation, and I really expect it to continue here. So as CEO of Future Ready Columbus, we are a collective impact. We are not programmatic in our work. We are looking at systems and looking at the systems that influence a child's readiness before kindergarten, starting before a child's even born. So we have a prenatal to age 5 focus, and we're looking county-wide across the community to say, each of us as community members or as business owners, nonprofit leaders, we all have an investment to make in our children. So when I look at the kindergarten readiness assessment, this is an assessment that's given to every kindergartner in the state of Ohio. By November 1, everyone's had this cute little assessment. It's not cute and it's not little. But we measure language, literacy, mathematics, physical development, and social emotional well-being. This is why Future Ready Columbus exists, because with my 41 years of experience as an educator, I agree with you, Karen. I saw those gaps 41 years ago, and they're bigger now. I started a nonprofit preschool to try to address the issue on the Hilltop. And it's bigger than the Hilltop. It's countywide. When we look at that KRA, that Kindergarten Readiness Assessment score, when you talk about the disparities, the economic and racial disparities are having a devastating impact on our children. When we look at that KRA score, 40% of the children in Franklin County, 40% of the children are entering kindergarten ready. And when you break that down by racial lines, 27% of our black children are entering kindergarten ready. 18% of our Hispanic children are entering kindergarten ready. When you look at the economic disparities, 28% of our economically disadvantaged children are entering kindergarten. And kindergarten readiness matters. It influences the trajectory of the child's life. So we at Future Ready love our partners on this stage and everyone in this room and live streaming, because we all as community members have a stake in this. When we invest in the lives of our young children, prenatal to age 5, it will change the child's life, the family's life, the community's life, and our county's life. The work we have to do is heavy, but it's integrated, and if we can work together, which is what Future Ready's doing, we're pulling us all around the same table to say we have to come together and address the inequities, because early learning matters. We've talked about, you introduced and said that the brain develops so quickly in those first 5 years. So we can jump into that. I don't want to hog the mic, but that's something that I think we should talk about, because it's something that needs to change in our community.
Professor Downey, you say that the external things in the community, the family, the experiences, are the things that help more early on than school does later on. How do we provide those experiences for single-parent homes? How do we provide those experiences for children who are living in circumstances that don't make preschool readily available?
Reduce the stress. We need to reduce how hard it is to be poor in the United States. So, yeah, you can clap, sure. So I think if we take a broad sociological lens here and think about other countries and what they're doing, they are having different experiences than us. Their children are not arriving at kindergarten with the large gaps that we see. If we compare ourselves to Canada, for example, Canadian children are ahead of our 4- and 5-year-olds in terms of vocabulary skills. Now, why is that? It doesn't have anything to do with school, and it's largely not a result of preschool either. It's a result of a larger set of decisions that creates a smaller level of inequality in Canadian society. It's much easier to be poor and disadvantaged in Canada with universal health care, with a different tax system. Our system of rewards and punishments just produces too much inequality to begin with. Then, yeah, we try to rub the rough edges off with schools, and we're a little bit successful with that, but our bigger problems are the larger decisions that we're making that create so much inequality in the first place.
Yeah, most definitely. When I share that data that I just did, that's not to lay blame or shame or guilt or to instill fear in anyone. I share that data as a wake-up call to say we need to join arms together, to link together to solve the challenges. To your point, logically thinking, a hungry child's learning is compromised walking in a classroom door. A homeless child's learning opportunity is compromised before they ever cross the threshold of a kindergarten door. A traumatized child has so much going on in their little bodies. I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I've had to deal with that. The challenges are great. So you exactly hit the nail on the head. It's not just reading and writing and arithmetic. right? I mean, we have to have healthy children. Create an opportunity, the environment for our children to grow up in a healthy system, actually. When we talk about kindergarten readiness, we're looking at children who are generally happy. Children are generally happy, and they can handle their emotions. When we look at children ready for kindergarten, can you focus? Can you pay attention? Can you zero in on the speaker, right? Can you interact positively with folks? Those are the kind of things we're looking at. Those are the kind of measurements that matter.
Those really influence your success when you get to formal schooling. And one of the concerns I have is that when children are exposed to a great deal of stress in the first 1,000 days of their life, it has physical effects on their brain. It does two things. It increases the size of the amygdala, which is bad because then their anger comes out more, and it reduces the size of the frontal cortex. Both of those physical effects, what we call epigenetic effects on the brain, are then difficult to ever change later. So that child gets to kindergarten, and even a child who is very interested in succeeding in kindergarten and wants to succeed, but they are going to struggle against these epigenetic physical changes to their brain that make it more difficult to control their behavior in the classroom.
I maybe should have mentioned early, I didn't do a really good job of introducing my organization. I'm with Patel for Kids, and we're a national not-for-profit located right here in Hilliard, Ohio. And we have an opportunity to work with school districts all across Ohio, but we also work with school districts all across the nation. And we're really focused more on K-12, really trying to create a re-envision education to equip students and young people to be successful in a really rapidly changing world. And we strongly believe the current model, a traditional model of education is sorely insufficient in meeting that need. On this same note, you know, the brain, and clearly we have an expert here, but we know that the brain is largely developed by age 5. There's some nominal growth after that, but it's largely by age
90% of
yeah,
the brain is
80 to
developed
95,
before age 5.
80 to 90% is already, and I think a lot of people don't really realize that. And so that's why I think as a country we've been reticent to make the investments that are needed, you know, across in terms of dealing with food insecurities and those other kinds of things. And also, just it's shocking when you look across our country how recently full-day kindergarten has been added for many states, and how hard it is to even get funding for universal pre-K as well. So we're sorely behind on those things, but I completely agree with the professor in that it's broader and much more complex than just what the schools are providing. And you have to wonder as a society and as a country, how has COVID exacerbated some of the stress and trauma in families? I think there's going to be far-reaching consequences if we don't begin to make significant moves to invest in the overall well-being of families and young people at the earliest ages.
I'm pleased to tell you that that's going on in Franklin County. Drum roll, please. It's a big deal, actually. Future Ready Columbus is giving leadership as this collective impact to what you just said, Karen. We have a draft plan, actually, that was created in community, not for the community, but with the community's voice. When we talk about families and such, it's really critically important to have the families at the table to weigh in on the challenges before us. So we have a draft plan called Future Ready by 5. It was pretty creative on our part, I think, to name it Future Ready by 5. And when I say that we're looking at, when we talk about a child's readiness, that it's not just reading, writing, and mathematics, we look at this child as a whole person, as a being, and all the influences that impact that child's life. And so we formed an early childhood advisory council made up of a diverse group of stakeholders within our community. And together with our fabulous board of directors and with that early childhood advisory council, wrote a draft plan. And we've taken 6 months to press pause and to go out into the community and say, what do you think? Many of you in this room, I have had conversations with you saying, what's the strength of this plan? What's missing from this plan? This is not my plan. It's not Future Ready Columbus's plan. It's Franklin County's plan. So to date, we have had conversations and connected with close to 1,400 people, and I'm not satisfied with that. So if I could please, Madam Moderator, just for a moment say, please go to futurereadycolumbus.org. There is a question there for you. 8 questions, 10 minutes. Your voice can be heard and influence a plan that will touch every child's life, every zip code, every ethnicity, every race, everyone along the socioeconomic strata. Please take 10 minutes and invest in the lives of our children and let your voice be heard. And we're going to have a great big celebration this fall when we take all the voices that we've heard in Franklin County, weave it into the Future Ready by 5 plan, and we will all join forces in a collective, integrated manner, collecting data, not just the yearly data, but data, key data points along housing, food, safety, broadband access, transportation. All of those things influence a child's readiness. So I'm looking to see our numbers really bump up on those who will answer those questions on that survey. No
But
pressure.
In terms of economic stability, economic is the word, 3 meals a day, and housing, safety, security, that all takes money. Is the child tax credit going to be enough?
I mean, that's a good question. It's being legislated now. I think the child tax credit that's being talked about right now is, along with the dependent care credit, is significant legislation. If, this will really matter. And I believe this is education-related legislation, because I think by helping those on the bottom of the stratification ladder, that's where this money is targeted, it will prepare those children for school better. They will perform better in school. They will succeed in school more. They will be less likely to be imprisoned. They will need fewer social services. It will be a really good investment financially. So I'm encouraged by that legislation. It puts us more in line with the kinds of decisions that other countries have made about how much inequality are we okay with our economic and political system. We start to move in that direction a little bit more. Right now, compared to other economically developed countries like the United States, we spend about 1/3 as much investing in the early years of our children. It is a very poor decision to spend less than these other countries, both economically and I believe morally. It's a poor decision. We should be leading the pack in terms of those investments because they will pay off a great deal. That child tax credit is exactly the kind of legislation that moves in the right direction, I think.
I think we're all hopeful, and certainly I think it's a promising sign, as you indicated. We like to think about a response to this is more like you have to create thriving ecosystems, where it's the school sitting within a community where there's an equal investment in all the young people in that community. Schools, churches, everyone coming together and say we all take responsibility for keeping our families strong and our young people healthy and their well-being. What we know though is the brain at very early ages they need to be intellectually stimulated. They need to be. That's how you connect neurons in the brain. I mean, you're born with all the neurons and cells you're going to have for the rest of your life. The goal is connecting those. And if the brain development, is largely done by age 5, what a wonderful opportunity we have here in the Columbus area, because we have some of the best libraries, museums. We have so many things that we can tie into that can provide some of those intellectually stimulating kinds of activities in ways that we know will grow strong brains and healthy minds that really equip them. This is strongly correlated to, those early experiences are strongly correlated to success in school and in life down the road. And I believe the professor kind of alluded to that earlier. And I think the research is really clear on that. But I think I'm anxious to see your plan because I think this community has so many assets to really create that thriving ecosystem that will really create those strong families.
Wow, yes, and it's happening. Specific to your question, and I know Dr. Downey knows this research as well, I'm sure that every dollar that's invested in high-quality childcare or learning opportunities for our children yields a $7.30 benefit down the road. It does arrest the prison pipeline. There are less children don't repeat grades. They're less likely to be assigned to special education. The teen pregnancies go down. Brushes with juvenile justice goes down. Incarceration goes down. In post-high school educational opportunities, and Dr. Comerford can speak to this, they go up. Economic, the income rates go up. So $1 today will yield us $7.30 in the future. It's so obvious, isn't it? And yet,
Great return on investment.
exactly. And you mentioned the assets within our community, and I mentioned this Future Ready by 5 plan. I have engaged in zero arm twisting across this county to say, this is a plan. What do you think? And before I even can say, would you like to be a piece of the solution, our community is stepping up. The Columbus Metropolitan Library is saying, count me in. I want to own these strategies. I will bring people around the table and give leadership to this. CODA, Mid-Ohio Food Collective, churches. It's happening, and I am told that it's going to be pretty amazing, not just in our local level, but we're collecting our stories and our data because this can influence the national platform right here in Central Ohio. To go national, that's not our goal. To do the right thing for our children in Franklin County today, you better believe that's the goal. And if the data proves true, which we have every belief, listen to us, we have every belief it will, then let's influence the larger world and save some more lives, right? That's where we're going. That's a trend in Central Ohio that will influence trends across the country.
With all of the accessible activities, with all of the wonderful resources, how do we get the word out to people who are working 2 jobs and can't find the time to read to their child or to take their child to reading lessons, reading sessions at the libraries? How do you reach out to these households?
You reach out where there are relationships. Relationships matter. If I have a relationship with Dr. Dixon, my guess is I can influence Dr. Dixon's behavior or practices within her home, right? If I don't have a relationship with Dr. Dixon and I just preach to her, like, is that really going to make a difference in her practices in her home? So you go where the relationships are: schools, churches, barbershops, grocery stores, libraries, parks. You have to go where we're relational people, and you lead with that, and wonderful things start to happen.
I agree with all that. But I would also take a step back and look at this as a bigger societal issue. I don't think we have weaker relationships, for example, than those in Canada. So why do we have bigger problems with our disadvantaged population? They endure more stress, and so we have to ask ourselves serious questions about the structure of the capitalist system that we have, and whether we can have a different kind of capitalism that meets our needs in a more humane way. Those are bigger questions. You mentioned that, and you're like, oh, there's communists around. Oh no, we don't want to hear that. We don't want to mess with capitalism. But I think we can have a rigorous market-based capitalistic system that is very productive, but also is humane and meets the needs of those who are less fortunate than ourselves. And so those are the kinds of things that countries in Europe and Canada are doing differently than us, that are reducing the stress at a large level for the bottom part of our population in terms of income that are really making a big difference and improving the lives of that group.
I know many of you may be familiar with Robert Putnam's work, and one of his first books was Bowling Alone, and really talked about how we've become very isolated as a people. And I think we've got to get beyond that and begin to consider, as Douglas was saying, how is the life of a child living across the other side of town going to affect me, and why should I be interested? Well, you should be interested because, we're all connected to one another. And I think we do have to have these kind of conversations about how do we keep families strong. And I would be on board with what you're suggesting around, housing, for an example, access to high-quality health care for families. It's hard to find those things. We think it's out there, and people, if they would just, try, it would be out. It's really harder than people think to access the things you need when you're struggling just to get by. And I think sometimes we think, well, it's out there, we're doing enough, and people need to, pull up their bootstraps and figure it out, and it's much harder than one might think. And I do think the investment in thinking differently about some of these things we know coming out of this pandemic, the mental health of young people today has been significantly impacted. Not only the effect it might have on children's growing brains, but I do think it's time for us to step back and say we must do things differently. I think not only in school systems today, but also in communities for young people and families in general.
We're going to move to questions from our in-person and live stream audience in just a few minutes. One final question. What is government's role in fixing this?
Well, that was a pause. I will say that, again, I'm the local level person here, that truthfully, I can say that the Franklin County Commissioners and the City of Columbus, with Mayor Ginther, one of his great platforms is early child investments in early childhood. He has put a great deal of money into Early Start Columbus, which increases access and availability for children in certain zip codes to have access to and utilization of high-quality care. And so, again, I am a very optimistic person, and the cup is half full, but I'm just stating facts. The county, the city, the nonprofit businesses, the for-profit businesses are understanding what we're saying on this platform today. And they're coming to the table wanting to be a part of the solution. So, yes, government has a role, but so do businesses when you look at the economics of it, but if you look at the moral imperative too. I have found in so many meetings that our community is tired of silo living. And our community is ready and are already knocking down the silos and saying, we must work together. Look outside the window. How's it working so far? To your point, Karen, we have to have these conversations. We have to change practices. We have to change the dynamics of our relationships. It has to happen, and it's happening.
Everyone knows politics is largely local, right? And that's the connection of the community, business, social enterprises, the faith-based community. Good work can happen in communities like that. With nonprofits and people that are interested and committed to being a part of the solution, but it's slow. It's really slow. So to me, government's role is helping. Government can help step in and accelerate and help us scale solutions much faster. Without government, and certainly well-meaning people throughout communities throughout the United States, I think that is important. But without government's help, I fear that it would take way too long, and the consequences long-term would be devastating. I think we can all, to me, it's it's local communities, well-meaning groups, not-for-profits like mine and yours and others, well-meaning groups that said we're going to be part of the solution. So I think it's that and government helping to accelerate and scale.
I think government government is us, we are the government. So it reflects the values that we have. What kind of world do we want to live in? And the kind of economy we have produces a lot of inequality. And so we have to, we're making decisions about what we want to do about that. Do we not want to do anything about it? That's a decision that we make as a group. Or we can say, we do think it makes sense to do something about this, and how can we go about that? And that's a government decision. I think it can be a really, especially for early childhood investments, it can be a really good decision to invest there.
I do want to piggyback on something that you have both indicated, that data is important. And if we're going to put money into the lives of young children, we need to prove that what we're saying will happen actually is happening, correct? But our system was not developed overnight, to your point, and it's not going to change overnight. And we have to keep our eye on the long game. And I specifically say this to investors. It's going to take time to change, truthfully, societal norms, which is, I think, what you're alluding to, correct?
I want big change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but change takes time. And we need to change today and tomorrow. And we can't lose our heart. We have to really keep driving. And to funders that really, show me the data so I can support your cause more. We will have shorter bursts of data, but when we're looking at a systemic change, it's going to take time. And we need folks to stick with the plan and not lose heart if the needle doesn't move quickly enough. It's a societal shift, and we have to be tenacious in sticking with the goal.
I think we also need to consider new and more sophisticated ways of measuring things. Our current systems of measurement, whether it's for an example, in school systems, we sort and rank schools based upon a test score for one day in a child's life. And you ask any educator, they would say that's not good practice. You can certainly ask any expert, but yet, look at all that we do. It has profound implications. And so we've got to think differently about how we measure progress in all of these aspects, and we may not have the tools we really need to do that effectively, and in a really, I think, a sound way, psychometrically sound way as well. I think we need maybe new tools.
It's CMC's tradition to take audience questions. Jane Scott of CMC, you see her there at the microphone, is curating questions from the live stream audience. And for our audience in the room, please just line up behind Jane, because I know our panelists are eager and anxious to answer your questions. Jane, our first question.
This question's from William Wason. He says he's retired from OSU. It's a long question, so hang in. As principal of an inner-city school, I observed that many of our students lacked prerequisite skills. Teachers had not noticed, nor had they taught prerequisite skills. We surveyed our 6th grade students and found that significant percentages did not know such information as what day follows Tuesday, what month follows February, what page follows 122, what is your family name, what is your middle name, using a ruler, how long is a line that's 4.5 inches long, etc. Using a Peabody primary test, we found that significant numbers could not identify simple pictures by the correct name. Once teachers were aware and got over their astonishment, they taught these simple skills and significantly raised achievement among our students. How can trained educators fail to see that students lack such significant skills?
I would be surprised that they would miss that they don't have those significant skills. When you're in a classroom with children for 90 minutes or 7 hours in a day, it's pretty obvious as soon as the children walk through the door. That's one of the reasons that actually I became a school administrator, because when I started as a teacher, I thought, wow, I can influence 20 lives, or I can influence 500 lives or 700 lives, and then went to central office, let's influence thousands of lives, and now a county. When you have that knowledge, which is certainly there, then you have to get into solutions mode and do something about it. Oh, Karen?
I'd probably have to know more about how, when they were tested, and when did they assess children. But I will say, in my experience, and I've worked with countless thousands of teachers. Teachers want to do what's right for their children.
Always.
I can tell you that.
Always.
But I will tell you that being a teacher today is not an easy job. And right now that we have these curriculum, by the way, this is nationally, not just Ohio, where we have curriculum that's a mile wide and an inch deep. And so teachers feel a lot of stress to cover content. Rush through the content. In some cases, if they're still tied to a textbook, which I hope they're not, but there's still a lot that are. You know, it's trying to get from the beginning of the textbook all the way to the end of the textbook. So it's rushing through. And my organization, and we're very honored to work with Lisa Dixon and Columbus City Schools and many others across the country, is we need to really focus on deeper learning. We need to give students authentic work to do and opportunities to go deeper with their learning and not just cover content, but to really give kids an opportunity to go deeper. And then you create these lasting understandings and learnings that will go through with the child throughout the rest of their life. So part of the problem is this focus on content coverage and rush. And I think it's created a lot of stress for teachers and for students. And I think really has created conditions where teachers don't know their students in some cases as much as they would like to because of that pressure of accountability and the stress associated with that.
I think there's a consistent problem we make when we think about schools, especially schools serving low-income children. We think they are doing worse than they actually are. We are misinterpreting the strength of those schools in the following way. We measure their test scores, we look at those, the scores at Columbus City Schools, for example, are lower than Upper Arlington, and we conclude that the Columbus schools are doing, and the teachers serving those low-income kids are doing a poorer job than the teachers at Upper Arlington. Well, if you look at the data more closely and look at what's happening each 9-month period, the children in the low-income schools are learning just as fast as the children in the high-income schools. It's a remarkable pattern, one that we would not recognize or identify if we did not split the data by season. But what it suggests is that the teachers and administrators working with disadvantaged populations are doing much better than we think they are. And we tend to use schools as a way to we tend to blame schools for the inequalities that we see, but schools are largely reflecting the inequalities that stem from the larger system.
Hi, Courtney Filato with JP Morgan Chase. This is an awesome conversation today. I want to go back to what you said, Dr. Garza, about measurement. This is something that in my day job we talk a lot about, right? Not just outputs, but impacts. And then, Dr. Downey, to your comments about the systems approach piece to this. So, what communities or where have you seen good measurement of a program, something around early childhood, that's not just about the student, but about the impact that student's growth or those interventions have on the community, and not short term, but long term, which I realize, I think it was to your point, Jane, that's the hard part, right? For these longitudinal impacts, these longitudinal interventions, hanging around long enough to truly understand what the impact is on society, not just on a student.
Do you want to talk about measurement first?
Now, I would say I probably don't have the specific early childhood alternative types of measurements that Jane probably would be a much better source on that. I will tell you though, when we work with school systems across the country, and every state has some kind of accountability system. For some school systems, they see that as the driver of their work and to a large extent a barrier to innovation. The school districts we work with, they see that as, yes, that can sit over there, but that's not going to be our focus, right? And we will administer the test, we will comply with that, but that's not going to be our focus. We're going to work to equip our staff and our teachers to have more authentic tools and resources available to them to measure progress of students over time, more adaptive type testing and tools to measure progress, also more performance-based tasks, We ran a 4 to 5 year project in the state of the Commonwealth of Virginia around student-led assessment. It produced incredible outcomes. When you give students agency into their own learning, it is just incredible what they can achieve. So I guess my point is we've got to look at the way we measure effective schools and the effectiveness of any teacher or classroom or strategy with a multitude of different tools, not just one tool. And right now, in many cases, we're using one tool, one measure, and we're putting a lot of value judgments on that one tool, when there's a wealth of research and great assessment practices that teachers can employ that can give you a broader picture, and by the way, give you a lot better information in order to have a conversation with a parent or a child about their progress.
I'd like to hop in on that too, if I could, please. Because of this local effort that's afoot, we really have gathered brilliant people in Franklin County who data is their day job, like they eat, sleep, drink, breathe it, because they have something of value to offer to those KPIs that we're talking about. So if CODA, for instance, invests and understands, which they are, the importance that transportation plays in a child's kindergarten readiness, we're deploying this team that we've called together, this data specialist team, to work with CODA to understand what key measurements are we looking for. Not how many tickets did you give away, but when you gave those tickets away, what impact? We need to measure impact. The Columbus Metropolitan Library, they're creating toolkits to get into places in homes, but they're also putting places of learning and reading in the drugstores, in grocery stores. Okay, that's great, but what's the KPI for that? How do we measure the impact that those strategies have? So we're going to be gathering lots of really interesting data to not just wait for that KRA score or not just wait for that one day of assessment, but to show the impact that changing housing practices, nutrition practices, library practices, transportation practices, all of those are going to be really interesting data points for us to report out to you, right? To show that that is overarching, creating a change over the annual one-day score. So there's work to be done, but we're being very innovative in deciding and determining how to do that. And we're calling on the experts in our community to come alongside the early learning community and get that done.
So we have quite a few questions, so we'll try to go quickly here and get as many in as possible. Francis Strickland asks, are you concerned that the changing job market and the return of rhetoric about mothers wanting to stay home will weaken potential support for quality early childhood programs?
Oh, I'll take that, if you don't mind, but feel free to jump in, obviously. Oh, okay. I'm concerned for a different reason, Francis, because on average, our early child care providers make a little over $10.50 an hour with no benefits. And so that is what's impacting a high quality early child care or early childhood workforce. And we have a challenge. Right now, there are 200 open positions for early child care professionals. And when you make $10.67 an hour with no benefits, it's almost cheaper to stay home. Many of our early child care professionals qualify for public assistance. That has to change. And when we think about our state opening up on June 2nd, we project, the numbers have been projected for me, that we will have 600 openings. Childcare is the workforce that supports the workforce. So we truly have something brewing that we need to address. So am I concerned about the quality of childcare professionals? Yes. But it's not just because moms want to stay at home. There's an economic impact to this that will have a larger economic impact on our community. And we need to correct a broken system that was broken before a pandemic, and this has really, the pandemic has certainly highlighted the inequities that exist in our community. And it's a call for action.
Question.
Hi, everyone. Justin Parisi, Manning and Napier Advisors. The takeaway that I have in hearing each of you speak really is around the immediate and need and the severity of the investment that we can put in early to reap the societal shifts and the rewards going forward. Of course, there are opportunities to do that through government and through the nonprofit sector. My question is, if each of you had your druthers, would the government exist in supporting these programs institutionally through the existing education system that's in place? Or would they bolster up the efforts of the existing nonprofit sector through groups like Future Ready by 5, Battelle Columbus, other youth mentorship groups like Seeds of Caring and Big Brothers Big Sisters?
I think it's a yes.
You stole my answer.
Oh, is that what it was going to be? Yes. Yeah, I definitely think that it could be both. But I will say that there have been pockets of success across the country where there were investments in public schools, where they were given extra dollars to fund high-quality, trained professionals who went into daycare centers throughout the community. And the results were phenomenal. And those were funded largely by grants, and it was had wonderful outcomes, but yet it was not, the funding wasn't continued. So I think there's some very innovative ways we can think about partnerships, both in the nonprofit space and the public school space, working together and utilizing resources. For an example, many public schools across the country, one of the inhibiting factors to having full universal pre-K or full day pre-K or even full day kindergarten in some states is they'll say their facilities, they don't have adequate facilities to even accommodate that if they wanted to. And just that investment is very daunting when you have to think about facilities. Well, that was the reason why we partnered with local daycare providers, and we put our professionals in their centers. And again, we solved the problem of the facility, and yet we were able to provide a high-quality program for families in their own communities.
I'm unofficially going to thank you all, and Stephen gets to do the official thanks.
Wow. Well, I hope you found today's forum inspiring. Together, one of the things I've taken away here is that we're embracing the challenges. We're embracing the challenges around the disparities that we heard today and supporting our early learners and youth readiness, and we're not satisfied. I think it's one of the quotes we had here today, and it's clear we're going to join forces to solve these external problems, family, economic stress, policy issues, more, as well as challenges in schools, and looking at this holistically. And I'm encouraged. I'm ready to roll up my sleeves and get to work, as I hope all of you are as well. And then next week in CMC, we'll engage three sides: the police, the community, and the judicial, in to serve and protect. A conversation about perceptions of policing in our community. This is a tough and hopeful, enlightening conversation that we hope you will participate in as we seek common ground. So again, we want to thank our supporters and sponsors today, J.P. Morgan Chase, the Robert Weiler Company, and thanks to the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch and PNC. And thank you to our online virtual seat patrons, and special appreciation and thanks to our speakers, Dr. Douglas Downey, Dr. Karen Garza, Jane Leach, Carol Looper. Let's give them another round of applause. But we could not do this without each and every one of you. So we'll see you again on Wednesday of next week. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.